All right, hey guys. I'm actually curious. So Lily said there's 30 million Bitcoin holders out there in the world. I'm curious, like in this audience, can you raise your hand if you have any Bitcoin? Let's see a percentage. All right, looks like we're doing pretty good here. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the long-term implications of sort of what it means to have these seizure-resistant stores of value. 我本来打算用中文给这个讲，但是今天主办方跟我说没有同声翻译，所以我觉得可能还是得用英文讲。对不起大家。So sorry, English speakers. The rest of the talk will be in English. You don't have to start learning Chinese quite yet. I think if you are in the cryptocurrency space, it might not be a bad idea. So yeah, I'm going to talk about one of the sort of weirder and more out there implications of cryptocurrency as a store of value. Hopefully it'll be interesting to everyone. I'm going to start with some history, and then I'm going to talk about the near future. So to give a little bit of background on who I am, I'm a partner at INB. We're like the biggest crypto fund in China. We're one of the largest holders of Bitcoin in the world. And we're also early investors in Zcash, and Sia, BitShares, Digix, and a whole bunch of other cryptocurrency projects. So besides investing, we also used to operate Yunbi, which was like a top 10 cryptocurrency exchange. The Chinese government very politely asked us to shut that down, along with all the other crypto exchanges in China. So Yunbi is on hold right now. We're in the process of opening a bunch of other exchanges. We have experience with basically every part of the crypto asset universe, from exchanges to investing to mining. And so it's given us kind of like a different perspective than maybe some other pure investors have. Also, like on a personal level, I'm a Jewish guy, descended from a long line of people with a pathological distrust of authority, many of whom have had firsthand experience with what happens when you let the people in charge get too powerful. So I'm really excited about cryptocurrency, maybe for different reasons than some other investors. But no matter who you are, I think if you're investing in a new asset class like this, it's important to understand not just the really likely effects, but also the less likely effects that would have an extremely outsized impact on your investment. So we're going to talk about one of those today. So we got this quote. I dropped out of Peking University as a sophomore, but I still kind of have some school pride, so I couldn't resist using this quote from a professor at our school. He says, it's entirely possible for a non-territorial sovereign state to exist in the world without holding a single piece of land. So you just hold that thought. We're going to give a little bit of background first on like what cryptocurrency actually is, because that's really important to understand the rest of this. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is an unseizable, private, deflationary, permissionless store of value. And I say Bitcoin here, but actually like this applies to basically every good cryptocurrency. So like Zcash, Monero, whatever, anything that's a fixed issuance and that has a truly decentralized basis. So something like IOTA or Ripple would not qualify, but the really truly decentralized coins would work in this framework just as well as Bitcoin. So let's break this down. What does it mean to be unseizable? So what seizure resistance means basically is just that it's really hard to take someone's Bitcoin away if they are stored properly. That's a huge if. That if should be like font size 300. It's people fail at this all the time. I mean, you hear about Bitcoin getting seized all the time. The government of Bulgaria recently seized $3 billion of Bitcoin. So right now, Bulgaria is like winning the government race on who has the most Bitcoin. But if you do it right, you can make it basically impossible for someone to take your Bitcoin. So for example, like if you were listening to our early panel, my friend Jordan has a method called Shamir secret sharing, where you can take your private key and you can split it up. And so you can put those splits into like geographically distinct locations, sort of like Voldemort with the Horcrux. And in that way, like it becomes very, very difficult for anyone to ever sort of seize this Bitcoin. So let's see. So who is that important for? Who like wants an unseizable store of value? The first group is the extremely rich. So we have this guy, Prince Al Walid. He was until very recently running Saudi Arabia's largest investment vehicle. He was actually arrested a couple weeks ago because he lost favor with the people in power. Ironically, literally days before that happened, he went on TV bad-mouthing Bitcoin. Had he just bought some Bitcoin, he might be a lot better off now. I'm not saying there's like a curse on people that bad-mouth Bitcoin, but there might be a curse. So the other group that it's really important for, besides the extremely rich, is the extremely poor. So like this is something that's really important to me personally. I think when people think of like a genocide, People think of death camps and gas chambers, but really what the early stage of a genocide looks like is sort of like this painting. You have a lot of people hitting the road, and they're being driven off of their land, and they're not able to take much with them. And in many cases, people die because they're unable to leave, they're unable to liquidate their assets, and they stay somewhere that there's clear signs of danger until it's too late. So I think it's really easy to scoff at the idea of putting Bitcoin in the hands of, say, refugees or genocide victims. You can say that's just like Silicon Valley idealism or whatever. I think that might be a mistake. So there's a lot of technology, for example, like mobile payments. Nomadic cattle herders in Kenya, they all have M-Pesa, they have cell phones. They might not have running water, but they do have those things. I think there's a decent chance that Bitcoin ends up being a very appropriate technology for the safe storage of assets, even in places that are technologically limited in other ways. So another group that really needs an unseizable store of value is anyone that's doing stuff that governments don't like. There's a lot of stuff that's worth doing that governments don't like. So this is pretty important. Like a good example of this is WikiLeaks. So WikiLeaks had a lot of donations, and they got their donations cut off. So the government put a lot of pressure on the big credit card networks to not allow people to donate to WikiLeaks. And so WikiLeaks was forced to accept Bitcoin. I don't actually think WikiLeaks was that into Bitcoin, and they had no choice. And so then, like a month ago, Julian Assange tweeted this. He says, my deepest thanks to the US government, Senator McCain and Senator Lieberman, for pushing Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Amex, moneybookers, et cetera, into erecting an illegal banking blockade against WikiLeaks, starting in 2010. It caused us to invest in Bitcoin with 50,000% returns. So, yeah. So WikiLeaks doesn't have to worry about funding for a while. And then the last group that it's important for is it's important for corporations that are operating in sketchy jurisdictions. This is kind of for the same reason that it's important for extremely wealthy people. So I won't spend too much time on this, but I mean, like in Turkey, there was a coup attempt, and the government used it as an excuse to just seize like $11 billion worth of corporate assets. I don't know if you guys can read the letters there are a little small, but in addition to like publicly traded companies, they seized a bunch of baklava joints. I think like the chance that like a pastry chain is involved in a coup is pretty low. But maybe you want to keep some money in Bitcoin if you're operating in a jurisdiction like that. Okay, so the other cool thing about Bitcoin is that it's very private. So like the first rule of Bitcoin is always talk about Bitcoin. And the second rule of Bitcoin is never talk about your Bitcoins. And this sort of just adds to the unseizability. So no one really needs to know if you have any Bitcoin or not. If you use Bitcoin to buy stuff, it's actually not very private. But if you use Bitcoin just to store value, it's actually a fairly private way to keep money. It's also getting a bunch of upgrades over the next year or two, confidential transactions and a bunch of other stuff that's going to make it even more private. And of course, there are other cryptocurrencies which have privacy as a focus, like Monero and Zcash. So it's safe to say that like wealth held in cryptocurrency can be extremely private. And to understand why trustless privacy is a really important thing, I think we can look at what happened with one of the most famous private banking systems, the Swiss banks, at the outset of World War II. So back then, there were a lot of Jewish people that had deposits in these Swiss banks. And the Swiss had banking secrecy laws that made it illegal for them to tell the Nazis, who was Jewish and who wasn't. And so these Jewish people had their deposits protected through the war. And it was, it looked like a good story, but it ends up having a really sad ending. So when many of these people died in the Holocaust, the Swiss banks basically just appropriated their money. And when their heirs came looking for it, they were just turned away. There was a lawsuit. The lawsuit stretched on for like 10 years. There was like $1 billion settlement. But the moral of the story here is pretty clear. Like, privacy is important, and you can't trust anyone. And when you have something like Bitcoin that allows you to have this trustless store of value, it's an incredibly powerful tool. Cool, so the other thing that's Bitcoin is deflationary. Deflationary really is just another way of saying seizure resistant, because inflation itself is basically a subtle form of seizure. So as Keynes said, by means of inflation, government may secretly confiscate the wealth of the people, and not one man in a million will detect the theft. Bitcoin has like a fixed issuance of 21 million coins. There's a lot that could be said about this. I kind of want to get to the meat of the talk, so I'll just make 2 quick points. One is that like fiat currency inflation is pretty significant even in the first world. So like even in America, we've had like 900% inflation since the 50s. Compared to Venezuela, that's nothing. So if you're in a country that has poor financial management, I mean, fiat currency inflation can be life-threatening, and in fact it is in Venezuela. Interestingly, there's a lot of arguments that inflation is actually good for countries. I think that the relevance of that is kind of limited because if inflation is bad for individuals and you offer individuals the choice of a non-inflationary currency, they're going to take it. And so you can see kind of how Bitcoin could replace fiat in a lot of places just on that ground. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on before I get into the meat of this is the elephant in the room with Bitcoin is volatility. I think it's actually a fairly small elephant. I'll explain why. So like the volatility of Bitcoin is going down. That's this upper right graph. This ends in 2016, so it's gone up a little bit since then, but it's still on a downward trend. You can see like on this bottom thing here, Bitcoin's on the left. You got Twitter stock and oil on the right. This is from Chris Bernisky, a really great Bitcoin analyst. So you can see that like Bitcoin is volatile. It's not that much more volatile than other assets that people happily hold. And then the other kind of cool thing about Bitcoin in a volatility sense is that although it is quite volatile, it's also not really correlated with most other assets. And so as part of a diversified portfolio, it actually decreases volatility. Cool. Okay, so we're back to this quote. So it's absolutely possible for a non-territorial sovereign state to exist in the world without holding a single piece of land. So unfortunately, like most of the people that are trying to start new countries these days did not seem to get this memo. There's a lot of people out there that when they want to start a new country, the first thing they think of is like they got to get some land. And so we have people like the seasteading guys that are trying to like build new land in the ocean. There's these awesome guys called Sealand, where they just found this derelict concrete platform, and they took it over and they declared themselves the king and queen of Sealand. Got like Roger Ver, another very famous Bitcoiner, is currently in the process of trying to buy some land for our country. I think these are all really mistaken approaches. So the big problem with this approach is that once you actually do manage to get some land, someone's just going to come and kick you off. And this happened to me. So like some guys tried to claim an island near Tonga. It was like an island that was mostly underwater, and they put a lot of sand on it, and they were like, this is our country. It's called Minerva. And the Tongans sent like 10 soldiers. And they were like, nope, it's not. And that was the end of that. So like unless other countries agree that you're a country, no one's going to come to your defense when that happens. There's some other kind of tactics people have tried. Like they've tried getting another country to lease them some land, and the idea is that they would develop it and it would become sovereign. But the problem with that is like inevitably, if you do well, the country that you're being hosted by is just going to take it over, and there's going to be minimal resistance from other countries when they do that. All right, so what makes a country? Number one, you have to have the recognition of other countries. That's it. There's no number two. That's all it really takes. This is called the constitutive theory of statehood, and it's the theory that I think is most in line with reality, and it's a very practical way to go about being a country. So how do you get the recognition of other countries? The first thing you need to do is get some money. And the basis of diplomatic relations is usually economic relations and trade. So you need to raise a sovereign wealth fund for a new country. So great, so you go open a bank account to start this fund. Only the problem is the second you open a bank account in any other country, you're not a sovereign anymore. You're just like a cute project being run out of a bank somewhere. And the second you stop being cute, that bank account is getting shut down. So you probably see where this is going. This is a Bitcoin conference. Our new country is Sovereign Wealth Fund. Here's the address. You just send some Bitcoin in there. Once it's big enough to do something interesting, you're good to go. So maybe you come up with a catchy name, call it like the First Distributed Republic. Cool, so now you want to establish diplomacy. The FDR has a sovereign wealth fund now. We want other countries to play with it like as an equal. So at first, the other countries that are interested in diplomatic relations with you will probably be either ones that are ideologically well aligned, like guys like Iceland or something that are really into personal freedoms, or ones that are just really poor and need foreign investment. So in both of these cases, the country just goes ahead and makes large investments from its sovereign wealth fund of Bitcoin in exchange for the establishment of diplomatic relations with the new country. So for example, like maybe we have a country in the developing world that wants to build a large solar power plant, but it doesn't have either the capital or the demand to do so right now at the scale where it would make sense. And you could have this new country's fund invest, and you create the plant. Maybe you go use it to mine some Bitcoin. And once the local demand catches up, then you can return that investment back to the country that it belongs to. And in the meantime, now the country has been recognized, you're going to go ahead and establish an embassy. So this is basically a bootstrappable process. You have this national fund. It makes investments in other countries. It gets recognition. The currency appreciates a lot. Bitcoin's going to go up, and a real country's using it. And as a bonus, whenever the country establishes diplomatic relations, you're going to throw an embassy down there. And eventually you have what is essentially like a distributed country using an archipelago of embassies. So a lot of the most important services that countries offer these days have actually nothing to do with land or territory. They're essentially virtual. So passports, for example, corporate domicile, distributed entities like blockchain startups and internet companies. There's a lot of interesting stuff that could be done with a jurisdiction that's custom designed for these distributed economic entities. A decentralized arbitration service could be offered to both citizens and corporations of a distributed republic. So suffice it to say, there's a lot of interesting things that a landless country can do for its citizens and trading partners, provided that it's actually recognized by other countries. We see something sort of like of a prisoner's dilemma here. It's actually like, it's really advantageous for other countries to start recognizing you and taking your Bitcoin, but they all kind of dislike Bitcoin and don't want to do it. However, the first one to defect is going to make a lot of money. And so you can sort of stimulate this whole process that way. Is this possible? Has this ever happened? In fact, there actually is an example of a landless sovereign entity. These are all the countries that have its embassies. It's called the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. And it's been around since the Crusades. And it's mostly a charitable entity. And they do relief in disaster zones. And they are recognized as a sovereign entity by the UN, by a whole bunch of other countries. And they have no actual territory. But they do have these very pretty embassies all over Europe. So this is a thing that people are doing. Okay, so once you got recognition, you got a lot of countries going, maybe at this point you actually do want to get some land. You've established all these diplomatic relations. You know, the citizens of this country could in fact decide to purchase some land and instantiate the virtual entity into the real world, like a Louisiana purchase of the 21st century. This isn't out of the question. I mean, a lot of US territory that we think of as just being part of the US was actually just bought from Russia and France. I think there are some really real downsides to having land. I think in many ways land is a liability more than an asset. And the citizens of this hypothetical country would have to weigh their options. But it's a practical possibility for them at this point, where that's out of the reach of any micronation project before them. And so the only reason this was possible is that cryptocurrency provides this permissionless, unseizable way for them to store value. Cool, so I hope this talk expanded the kind of things that you think might happen as a result of having this decentralized permissionless money. I think as investors, it's really easy to get stuck in a rut of evaluating how each new asset class is just like a better or worse version of something that we've already seen. I think with cryptocurrency, that's a really serious mistake, and that we're looking at a pretty different beast. I'd love to take any questions you guys have. If I don't get to your question, you can add me on WeChat, and I'll answer it there. Yeah, so the question that this guy had, which I think is a really astute one, is that I said Bitcoin was an uncorrelated asset class, but what he asked is, like, if the stock market crashes, is Bitcoin still going to be uncorrelated, or will Bitcoin go down as well? I think it's a really good question. I think like this idea that Bitcoin is uncorrelated has actually been sort of not tested yet, because we haven't had a huge stock market downturn. My personal view on this is that Bitcoin would go up a lot, but I think that's not something anyone knows with any empirical certainty until it happens, and I'll be really curious to see as well. Could I
Yeah, so I think it would be uncorrelated as well. But certainly that level of volatility maybe would be not as useful for a medium of exchange, right? What do you think of that?
Yeah. So like, if this country got off the ground, it would have to use Basecoin, okay, or another stable coin as a means of exchange. So like, I think Bitcoin would be the gold reserves in this scenario. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I want to give credit for that, the Twitter oil Bitcoin comparison to this guy, Chris Berniski. He's a really smart guy on Twitter. Good follow. I think Bitcoin, like you're buying groceries with Bitcoin is maybe the last use case that it conquers. I think the first two are the one that I talked about most during this talk, which is this like unseizable store of value. In that case, like volatility is not a great thing to have, but it's also not a killer. And also the volatility, it's really important to know like Bitcoin volatility is increasingly positive skewed. So like it's volatile, but it's just because it's going up really fast. And the second, the use case after this store of value use case, I think, is like as a reserve currency for small countries. So like a lot of small countries currently use the US dollar to pay their foreign debts, and I think Bitcoin could pretty quickly be adopted for that use case. The use case that you're discussing is like the medium of exchange, and I think that has to come way later. There's like a lot of technical stuff that has to be solved, so we have to have the Lightning Network or some other level 2 storage, level 2 solution. And then also, yeah, the volatility just has to be a lot lower. Yeah, can I get one more? Yeah, last question. Sorry? Oh yeah, I think Ethereum's cool. It's an interesting experiment. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks so much, Eric. All right, we're going to move on to the next panel, utility coins disrupting existing markets. If I can have Ben Yu, CEO of Stream, Amin Soleimani, CEO at SpankChain, Steve McKee, founding partner of Amentum, Saihong Lin, founder of Bodhi, and moderator Min H. Kim, ex-Civic and VP at BToken.
Hello? Okay. Hi, guys. We're really excited to have this panel today. So to start off, we'll just go around and do a couple of rounds of introductions. If you can tell me a little about your company and one common misperception that people, like investors, have about your company or business model as an icebreaker. That's how we'll kick it off.
Sure, great question. Wow. All right, so I'm Ben. We run Stream. So essentially, we're working to make content creation more profitable for content creators, namely videographers today, right? People who are on YouTube, who are on Facebook, Twitch, Periscope, so forth. And right now, they take 40 to 45% of all the revenue that the content creator makes, and that's before expenses. So in a lot of cases, that can be 100% of all the money that content creator makes. And so a common misperception that people have is that we are actually competing with these platforms directly, but actually what we're doing is we're building a protocol layer below these platforms such that we can disintermediate the power of these people to create a monopoly that allows them to charge such kind of like large rates of middleman fee, right? So today, for example, the reason that YouTube can charge 45% is because when you're on YouTube, you're stuck on YouTube. You have 10 million subscribers. Your two options are either you give up everything, you lose all that traction that you have, and you go somewhere else. And where would you even go? Because who has the reach, who has the network effect of YouTube? That's actually not the native save the world, right? If you take an open protocol, like let's say torrenting today, right? If you actually create a new torrent client, you have actually access to every single piece of content that was created before, because torrents by design are open protocol that are stored on third-party aggregator site, where any single client in the world shares the same pool of seeders and leechers, and there's no way for any client to really charge some extortionary fee to keep people locked in on a platform. So that's basically what we're doing, is building a protocol that kind of controls the content and the users on the layer separate from the platform, such that they are no longer able to keep that centralized silo of power. Oh, do you ever have one?
Yeah, so my name is Stephen Mackey. My introduction will be a little bit not as verbose. But I have a hybrid crypto hedge fund along with myself and 3 other partners. And we do public crypto market investing and like normal like protocol assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Zcash, as well as we do like traditional kind of like venture style ICO investing and pre-launch ICO tokens, basically to kind of build value up and down the stack and their networks, and basically be advocates for these projects that we invest in. And I also have a fairly popular podcast for cryptocurrency called Blockchannel, where we do provide educational resources and interviews with entrepreneurs and developers in the space, so we can more easily disseminate and distill all of the esoteric locked up knowledge that we've been compiling for the last 8 or 9 years, and to provide it in a more digestible platform.
Hi, my name is Amin Soleimani. I'm the CEO of SpankChain. It's an economic infrastructure for the adult entertainment industry. It's exactly what you think it is. It's porn on the blockchain. So we're building a core set of open source tools and smart contracts, a service layer for ad networks, payment channel hubs, video streaming infrastructure, and then a number of user-facing applications on top. One of the common misconceptions that VCs or investors might have looking at SpankChain is thinking that our token is transactional in a two-sided network, which it is not, because all of those models are doomed to fail.
Hi everyone, my name is Xia Honglin. I started to get involved in this area since 2011, starting by Bitcoin and later on Ethereum. And right now we are building Bodhi on top of Quantum. So Bodhi is another next generation of decentralized prediction markets. We are building Bodhi for 2 reasons. First of all, I think the conventional prediction markets are very expensive. Think about insurance, where you predict the bad thing gonna happen on you, right? Or sport betting, where you bet on the results of some sport, like the team's performance. Or there's future trading, for example. So all those prediction markets, conventional one, are so expensive. That's why a lot of people feel this it's very highly speculative area. Second reason, it's, and that's why it comes out like Algo and Gnosis, where they're building these decentralized prediction markets on top of Ethereum. However, I do see they have problem about their Oracle system, where when the Oracle itself is broken, then the wrong results gonna be basically will break the system. And Bodhi, we have totally different Oracle mechanism, so that the Oracle itself can be replaceable. And we are building this so that both solve the problem of the conventional prediction market as well as the existing decentralized prediction market.
Great, awesome. So I think this talk is really about utility coins. So I definitely want to pose a hypothetical scenario, right? So pretend besides our crypto fund here, pretend the SEC tomorrow, right, shows up at your doorstep, knocks on your door, and tells you, hey, we think it's actually a security, right? How would you respond in a 1 minute, very succinct way to prove that your token is not a security? And we'll start from there. Mm-hmm.
I will go back to my room and show them the legal term that our lawyer gave us. Yeah, that's why we work closely with lawyers to make sure our token is actually a utility token instead of security, for one. Second, we actually very carefully review what does security means, and so that our token has no other usage except for people will, using this token internally in our system, and they will get some return based on whether they are doing, or they are based on their contribution. So by this, they don't, they don't own some shares or gain some dividends. So basically, we carefully defined our scope of usage of our token to make sure it's actually utility.
So if the SEC showed up on our doorstep saying, hey, we think you're a security, I'd say, hey, it's nice to see you again. It's been a while since we saw you at Berkeley and we asked for your guidance. It would have been nice if you'd sent an email instead of showing up. But I think we'd probably try and argue with them, maybe in courts, ideally not. But I think that there's at least some ground that utility tokens stand on, that doesn't necessarily fit into the Howey test, and the SEC right now is trying to like fit all of the utility tokens into the Howey test. But one of the big things about the Howey test is that it makes it so that if you have a pre-functional token, then it's considered a security if you're selling it in advance. Now, one of the interesting things about networks that set them apart from golf courses, for example, is that a lot of the value creation happens before the token might actually be functional, because people can buy in and then start contributing in terms of PR leads to developers or evangelism about your network and stuff like that. And so I think that we would have a very reasonable conversation.
Sure, yeah, you're just jumping into hard questions right away, right? So, yeah, if the SEC show up at doorstep, of course, the first thing is, of course, show them the legal written opinion from lawyers. They're always very helpful to actually show why this thing is utility. But actually, there's a pretty simple precedent for us in our case, because people are already using virtual currencies, just like ours, on live streaming. So live streaming is a $5 billion transactional economy where people literally convert their US dollars or Chinese yuan straight into currencies like, the Twitch bit and Periscope part, and those are clearly not securities, right? They're clearly used for this purpose of actually paying for goods and services on the platform like a currency. And that's exactly what the Stream token is used for too, right? You use it in conjunction or replacement of like the Twitch bit or Periscope part for exactly the same purposes. So, we think it's pretty clear on a, white basis just to see that.
Great, awesome. So our panel is not only utility tokens, it's also called disrupting existing markets, right? So I'd love to hear from, for example, Amin. Do you think your total addressable market is all the people who watch porn, or is it, is it something a little smaller than that? Is it the guys who watch porn and have some sort of altcoin, like or Bitcoin? How do you size your market? And would also love to get Steven's view on, how should we determine what the total addressable market is when mainstream America is not necessarily familiar with how to even obtain, like Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, the total addressable market is everybody who watches porn and knows what crypto is at first. So that might be like 1% of people at first, and so we'd try and get 1% of that market. And then our view is that the consumer adoption of cryptocurrency is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. So as that 1% grows and becomes 10%, 50%, 100%, we would try and be positioned well enough to capture the growth.
Yeah, and then, like the general theory behind tokenization is usually to like remove some sort of like inefficiency that was pre-existent in some form of platform. So when you launch a token and you attempt to tokenize, essentially what you're trying to do is to remove some sort of inefficiency, and from that inefficiency you create a double-sided series of incentives that would then bring people in to adopt your platform, but to also potentially speculate on its future value depending on the type of token that it is. Now when it comes to something like SpankChain, which, like, full disclosure, I'm also an advisor there, it comes down to the right time for the right platform. And traditionally when you look at the adult film industry, they're usually some kind of the first purveyors of like new major technology on how they can improve their ecosystem and like monetize in some new manner. So I think it's a matter of like user interaction, the actual user experience itself aligning with the community and the level of scalability that we have currently. So like something like SpankChain and what it utilizes, like state channels, micropayments, things of that nature, which are very like provocative, very like new for a cryptocurrency, and we're trying to like explore like their actual like viability to remove those inefficiencies. So basically, it's a matter of like looking at the market as a whole, like seeing like what things have worked historically in the past to bring individuals on board, and then in what manner technologically can we remove those inefficiencies the best. And when I like look to advise SpankChain, for instance, I was looking at it not necessarily from the kind of like stigma that comes with the film industry. Like I saw that risk, but the real thing that captured me was the infrastructure and the fact that Amin and his team were actually like trying to make something work with this technology that was actually like innovative. And from a technological standpoint, like that excites me. And if it works for SpankChain's platform, then I would imagine it would work for others.
Yeah, so for Bodhi, so we are building this because we realize conventional prediction market has so many problems about security, about the performance, as well as like the cost, like tax plus maintenance fee are so high. Actually, when you think back about what blockchain provides, blockchain is not like, it's so powerful that it can disrupt anything. Blockchain provide a very cheap but trustable platform so that we don't require or depend on those very expensive agents anymore. Think about insurance. Why we need those insurance companies? Just because they provide a middleman so that we can trust those like trading markets, future trading markets. You have to go through a long KYC process to be able to participate on that. And in return, you actually got a very expensive platform to participate. So that's why we think blockchain in this area is so useful to keep it thin, keep it cheap, so that there's almost no cost to make it fully functional on blockchain. However, in the other way, like blockchain right now at this status, I don't want to talk about the future, but at this status, blockchain is very like functional limited. The block time is very long. It cannot host large data. So in terms of like high scalability or high performance computation, you won't be able to do that, or you are not able to host large scale data or doing big data computation on top of blockchain. So again, it actually limits those use case what kind of platform you are able to build on top of the blockchain. So even though you find some area where those agents or those middlemen are so expensive, maybe it could be not a good idea to build on top of blockchain. But for both prediction markets, after evaluate tons of projects for the past 3 and 4 years, I think prediction markets is one of the most promising platform that's doable and feasible to be built 100% on top of blockchain. Yep.
Yeah, those are great questions and great answers. So basically, I think Amin, has a great point where it's, at first most likely going to be the intersection of people who are in the specific industry that you're tackling. In our case, for example, video streaming, content distribution, and people who are into blockchain, right, already into crypto. But actually, the other side of that is the question of how do people get into crypto in the first place? And I think there is a really strong case to create a product. I think Earn.com, for example, is doing exactly this, right? What is that first consumer killer blockchain application, or what are few kinds of consumer killer blockchain applications that you can get that can actually introduce people to crypto such that they come into your system even without having to know about it on its own. And I think for example, what we're doing at Stream is a good example of what that could be, because people already are familiar with the user paradigm of converting normal fiat currencies into virtual currencies. And so it's a simple proposition to be able to tell them, hey, instead, why don't you use our virtual currency, which is just like the one you've been using, but better for A, B, and C, and D, right? It's infinitely liquid across a global market, so you can use it on any single platform, not just one platform. Every time you use it, there's not like a 40% tax on your currency, right? It's a much better currency, and it does a lot of things much better than basically a centralized currency can do, such that it's easy for people who even aren't engaged with crypto to begin to start adopting it because they see the clearer value proposition on a consumer level.
Yeah, one of our theses at SpankChain is that the group of people that is most motivated to adopt a new economic system is the group of people that is ostracized by the existing one. And there's sort of systemic discrimination against performers and businesses in the adult space at the hands of the banks and the payment processors. Like JP Morgan closes down accounts of porn stars in 2014 without warning. PayPal and Square will seize their funds and shut down their accounts. Visa and MasterCard will refuse to process their payments. And so you end up with intermediaries that like CC Bill charges like 10 or 15% just to process credit card payments online. So, but for this sort of industry, the real sell is put your money on the blockchain. It's sort of what Eric was saying just now. It's this unseizable store of value. And so then where SpankChain comes in is simply providing the tools to build their economy on top of the Ethereum blockchain and processing their payments at scale.
Great. Awesome. So, during a previous panel, they brought up the fact that in 2013, Bitcoin was really hot, and then there was sort of a winter, right? And now it does seem like, Bitcoin is back in and altcoins are back in. And to me, when I see it, it almost seems like, people who have purchasing power, like the millennials, are coming of age at a certain time, and they're also kind of enabling this big push. So would love to hear around your marketing strategy when you're doing user personas, for example. Like, obviously these people are interested in porn, for example, interested in video streaming, interested in altcoins, but how old are they, right? Like, what TV shows do they watch? Who is your ideal customer?
That's a great question. And thankfully for us, it's a very similar demographic, right? Who are the people, you're right, who are into this technology? It's people who are young, and that's true of almost any kind of new technology that comes out, right? It's the early adopters who are young, who are new, who are ready to do something. So we saw that with the internet, right? It's young people. And that's the beautiful thing, is like in our industry too, right? It's a similar demographic. Who are the people who are live streaming, who are watching videos, right? They're young people. And so it's a really, it's a good mix of, 18 to 34-year-olds who are predominantly male right now, but hopefully, that changes in future. And it's a good mix for us.
Yeah, I can echo like those sentiments there. Like, I guess as far as like crypto, like if we look at it as like a bell curve, right? The majority of the individuals that sort of fall in the middle of that curve are individuals between 18 and 34. And I previously spent about 2 years at Purse.io, which is an e-commerce platform for shopping on Amazon and for selling goods, kind of like Etsy, that facilitates like Bitcoin escrows in order to like manage these systems. And I spent a lot of time like working as the head of like growth and product content. So I looked at a lot of our data, a lot of our like analytics, and it was very obvious that the 18 to 34 is the bulk. 25 to 34 are the real individuals that are in the space, and I think that makes up the bulk of what I like to call like crypto natives. And then you have like individuals in the age range of like 34 to 45, and then there's that kind of like the long tail. Everyone else is just kind of off like beyond that category. And it's interesting because when you're going to build a persona for crypto, I mean, obviously you want to be relevant. Obviously you want to be able to educate individuals on what your product is. But a lot of the times you really are just marketing specifically for that segment, 18 to 34. And a lot of that is like very like technical forwarding. That's why you see so many different types of memes and things like that make the space so popular, is because a lot of us are just like, millennial kids. We grew up with SpongeBob. We grew up watching cartoons. And we're here now, and like we are, I guess, kind of like the wealth owners in crypto, because a lot of us kind of came in, we saw the big picture, and like myself, like I've been here for about 5 years, since I was 21, so I kind of grew up with crypto, and so I've kind of watched the marketing change over the past few years, and it went from very hardcore cypherpunk, libertarian, like slightly older 34-year-old folks that already had a little bit of wealth, 34 or greater, excuse me, and like they were interested in the space, and they were kind of the first adopters. And then shortly, a few years afterwards, after they got most of the kinks worked out, folks like me showed up. And so we've kind of just been here building the narrative in the community, and we're such a large part of the community that usually we're the segment that you want to speak to most, because we're going to continue to be the large wealth owners in crypto for at least the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, as far as SpankChain is concerned, the demographic overlap couldn't be better.
So for us, I believe our earliest user base gonna come from the existing crypto community, because for one, we required user to use crypto token to participate in this prediction market. I don't believe in the short term like those community like users from every area are able to learn how to use crypto token and use our product. So the very earliest user going to come from the crypto area. However, after our platform are being tested and we have good enough library to so that it's very easy to integrate, we're going to find all those existed conventional prediction market and persuade them to build their product on top of Body, so that they are blockchain powered, meaning their funds are managed by us, and like the whole logic are backed by blockchain. So it's almost impossible to be hacked by hackers. And in the long term wise, we do want to make it consumer facing, but given the current status, we only focus on make it as user-friendly as possible for crypto community. Yep.
Great. So we only have 2 minutes. I'll ask one last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So me and my co-founder, John Chow, at the B Token, we have a lot of our business meetings in Ubers, and I drop him off, and then I go to my own place. And all the Uber drivers, after we drop John off, ask me, what is this B Token? Is it like Bitcoin? They want to download the app. So what company or app do you think is the fastest in terms of an Uber driver who has no experience with altcoins going from 0 to 100? Like which company out there do you think is the market leader where, for 3 minutes, they're driving me home now and they're able to download it, steering wheels on the other hand, but, my Ether wallet, everything, and then they just are able to use it in a utility token fashion.
Yeah, the sell is like, wait, I can buy this and use this to pay for porn for the rest of my life? What?
Yeah, I'll shout out 3 main projects. I mean, you guys just heard from one, right? Earn.com. I think that's a fantastic example. Super easy pitch, right? It's like get paid to answer your emails, right? That's super simple. You just go there, and they've abstracted away all the difficulty about how to use it, right? Another good one's Steam, right? So Steam is kind of like Reddit, but every time you get an upvote, you get paid, right? Super simple value proposition. And Stream, we think we're the same thing, right? Get paid for making good content without any cost to your users, and as a user, get paid when you engage with content. So. Yeah, I think all those cases where people already are in these industries, right? They're already on Reddit, they're already answering emails, they're already watching videos. It's easy to just focus on the value proposition without even having to explain what the blockchain is, right? And then they get to know that more over time as they really engage with it.
My example would be Cent.co. So for another full disclosure, I'm an advisor on that project as well, along with myself and Jack Harwick, the CEO and founder of WikiHow and eHow. And essentially, it's like a Quora-like platform for the Ethereum community. So you can essentially ask questions, get feedback, make requests on this network, and in return, you essentially post up an Ethereum bounty. And it all works in the browser, and it's actually open today. I think we have somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 users in the current mainnet beta. But essentially, it's very straightforward. You go in, you supply us with an Ethereum address, so whether that's from MetaMask, Coinbase, what have you, and then you just start being a part of the community. You start answering questions. You start giving sound responses and kind of inject your value into the community. And from that, depending on your position and how you do in each of the individual posts and bounties, you'll get a certain portion or reward in Ethereum instantly to your wallet. And each of these questions have a 24-hour time frame. So it's a very easy, simple way to onboard into crypto, learn also about all the things that individuals are talking about. So whether that's investing, the latest BIP or the latest IP, or the latest conversation or video or Medium posts about crypto. It's a great place for that, and it's very from a UI UX standpoint, very low barrier to entry and doesn't really require much to have that aha moment. I see the efficiency here and I see what it helps.
Yeah, I may tell him some a very upset answer. For me, even though, for example, our topic is called utility coins, but that's not really a coin or even a money. Honestly, utility coin is just a definition. A lot of tokens you buy or sell, it's actually not money. Don't think about it as money. So that's, I think it's a misconception. In terms of so which one gonna be really used by users? I don't think a lot of them gonna be really used by user because there's a very high learning curve. I believe most of utility coins in the future gonna be run underneath, under the protocol or platform, and user have no feeling, they are actually owning that. Even though perception only, they think they have that, but they don't have to deal with the private key, they don't have to deal with the wallet. They just see some number, just how you see the credit card, I'm so rich, I have so much money, but actually you never touch the balance of the credit card yourself, right? That's how the real money works. Utility coins, the same. In the long-term future, I don't believe user will have to manually and individually manage those coins themselves. And if say really, no, I'm not satisfied, tell me which one are really gonna be used, I would say Ethereum, Ether gonna maybe the one because CryptoKitty is so popular right now, and it actually, make it so widely spread it, and a lot of people are, oh, wow, this is a game I now finally understand. Fuck out those crypto stuff. I understand crypto kitty now. And they start to buy Ethereum. They try to purchase some kitty. That's a very big, I think it's a big milestone. Starting from that, people will try to adopt Ether. And later on, I believe if the market goes the right way, probably there will be more utility token or coins are being used, but that's, I think, a separate topic. Yeah.
Great. So I think, okay, we have to wrap it up. We don't have time for questions, but I'm sure the panelists would be happy to answer any of your questions near the 2 exits here. So thank you for having us.